welcome to the costuming and cosplay panel. I think we decided pushing the details this year. My name is Megan D. You can find me as Birdie D, either Birdie D Cos, Birdie D Costuming on most social medias, or just Birdie D. I am a historical costumer at a living history museum where my job is to do research into the historical clothing that people wore anywhere between 1760s all the way up to 1960. Research the fabric, the dye material that was used to give it color, the silhouettes, how they were made, and then use all of that research to actually make historical garments, which then goes into how I make this stuff.
I'm Britt. You can find me on most socials under Salsa Stark. I am just happy to be here. I do not have quite as an illustrious resume as Meg, but I definitely, cosplay and costuming has definitely been a relatively recent joy. I think it's been like 6-7 years now since I've been cosplaying.
Okay.
Yeah. So I work more specifically with foam. Foam is definitely an avenue I'm much more comfortable with. So today you'll hear kind of both sides of two levels of expertise for sure, and then also just different tips and tricks for working with fabrics, but also with foam as well. So.
Yeah. So I guess you kind of explained your cosplay or years in cosplay. I've also been like probably 5 years. I did some in college, but I was also very busy doing my college stuff.
Yeah. What's going under you?
It is. But outside of cosplay, I've probably had a little over a decade of sewing experience. Used to be I hated sewing. I was the tomboy girl that thought sewing was like anti-feminist.
Wait a minute. Is this your Arya to Sansa arc?
Yes.
Happening in real time?
Yes,
oh my God.
It was a real time Arya to Sansa arc. But yeah, so I've been sewing for quite a few years now. While I do it professionally, I also have been there. I sewed my own prom dress with very little experience, and I decided to grab probably the most complicated wedding dress pattern I could find in Joann's. It worked out, but I was hemming it as I was going out the door. So whatever level you're at, we have all been there. All right, whatever holds, and what doesn't, we'll fix when we get to that point.
I learned this firsthand, as if any of you saw the musical last night, my Marjorie Bodice is the first thing I have ever sewn, ever. And it was her pattern.
My pattern was not an easy pattern, and I wrote no instructions.
So, to be fair, your patterns that you sent along had really clear instructions. I just had to have translation help sometimes. I think at any level, what's been interesting to me, especially knowing you, I know our friend Kat, who's also a brilliant seamstress. If you saw the Brienne of Tarth walking around yesterday, that's Kat.
Mm-hmm.
She made all of that, the soft parts, the foam, all of it. So, but she even, she came over, she was helping me with the Marjorie Bodice, and even she said, not for nothing, this is hard. Patterning work especially is very difficult. But once you kind of get the puzzle pieces together, then you just start putting everything together. It gets relatively easier. Except if you're me and it's the night before I'm supposed to leave, and I'm still
I mean, I am always anti-con crunch. I think if you're going to that point, you're going to stress yourself out.
See, I thrive.
Yeah, I say that, and then
under pressure.
I am saying that, but I also finished sewing. I also finished hemming my dress, this one that I'm wearing today, like 2 days before the con.
Yeah.
So
You say you're anti-con-crunch, and then you're like, oh, yet.
Listen, I say I'm anti-con-crunch because we have friends that won't start their cosplays until a week before con.
We won't.
And
They're not in this room. We can talk about them freely.
Exactly. So I'm very much about trying to always have yourself prepared and giving yourself enough time, because half the things that like go wrong with, I think, cosplays always come from just from just not giving yourself enough time, and then trying to get it done before the convention. And convention's supposed to be fun. Cosplay's supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
Don't stress yourself out.
The measure and then remeasure rule for patterning and sewing, I feel like definitely also applies to foam. Any foam work you do, give yourself plenty of supplies and give yourself plenty of time, and draft and redraft. The armor bodice, Sansa's armor bodice, this is foam, and I made this for Con of Thrones. Was Nashville round 2, was that 2018?
That was
or 2017?
Did you make that before?
No.
So it was from
It was 2019. Okay, so Con of Thrones 2019. It was in Nashville, and I started and this is also the first foam piece I've ever made.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. It is my baby. But I started drafting this several months in advance. Obviously, I didn't have as much of a lead time as I would have liked, because I think at that point we were still getting reference photos and high quality photos.
Yes.
The show is also notoriously very dark, and oftentimes what you think is the color of a fabric is not in fact the color of said fabric.
They put
they do a lot of post work.
They do a lot of post work. Anyone that has watched the show knows they put a blue filter over everything.
Yeah.
So half the fabrics are actually very warm toned when you see them in person, but on the show they look very cool. Yeah. And I mean they look cool because they are cool, but they have a very cool color tone, which is sometimes it's one of the frustrating things about being a cosplayer is Game of Thrones is not the only victim of this.
Oh no!
I mean, if Wheel of Time has done it, Marvel movies they always put some sort of green, blue, yellow filter over it. Yeah. You're like, oh no, that's not the color.
Yeah. So I think a good rule of thumb always is measure, remeasure, draft, redraft, and really try to give yourself as much time. Because cons should be the fun part.
Yes.
You shouldn't be stressing out about a costume, while you're there even. God.
I mean, going off the draft and redraft, measure and measure. I always make at least 2 mock-ups of the costume before I actually cut into the real fabric. This one, I think I made 3 drafts because one, I accidentally started with a pattern, a base sloper that was too large, so then I had to bring it all in, make a second sloper that had all those all of the alterations, and then we had to re-alter it because there were some things that it's oh, well, we're going to focus on this part on the first draft, and I may have actually made 4. It was just...
I know there were a lot of late night text messages of, this doesn't look right, what's happening?
Yes.
How many drafts did you make of the Bolton wedding dress?
Actually, that did not have a lot. I made 1, and then that mock-up got turned into the lining. Because I did that. That was it wasn't quite a con crunch, but I definitely did not give myself a lot of lead time with it. Yeah. I think, let's see, the con was in July. I started it
So imagine wearing that in July in Nashville.
Yes. Well, I did not go outside a lot. I was very much focused only in the interior where it was heavily air conditioned.
Did you also wear that to Dragon Con one year?
Yes.
Which is in August and September.
It wasn't any better.
August and September, I just said that. It's in Atlanta in September.
Yes.
I haven't had coffee yet. It's fine.
No, I wore that for the costume contest at both Con of Thrones and Dragon Con.
Yeah.
Second place at Con of Thrones, didn't place at Dragon Con. And then the first place at a very, I don't know if anyone has heard of like Original Sewing Expo. It's mostly a quilting con.
You were a rock star, I bet.
Everyone
rolled up in there and those old ladies were like,
was obsessing about the quilting, and I had to give them the unfortunate news that I had not quilted that myself. I purchased the fabric like that. So there, I know that Joann's is like the main source for everyone. Trust me, I know. But honestly, if you, even in small towns, go to, if you can find like a quilting store, the quilt, it's going to be pretty much cotton, and honestly, cotton's best. I swear by cotton. Cotton and wool are amazing.
I'll take your word for it.
Especially for like Game of Thrones or any like long weather or like long sleeve stuff.
Yeah.
This dress is lined in cotton because I was like, it's already going to be hot.
Now, okay, tell me about this fabric specifically.
Oh goodness.
What is it? Is it fur?
It is technically a fur.
Okay.
That, to my knowledge, was then painted over. They did like a paint job that gives it the scale effect. It is a knit fabric, which is nice for getting a really close fit. But I did have to, since the lining is not knit, I had to put it on the bias. Which I don't like, depending on your knowledge of fabric, that's another really good construction tip, is if you're going to be combining knits and wovens, at some point, you need to make sure that they can have that same stretch, because otherwise, like the main fabric that does have the knit will just kind of sag. So to make sure that they're lined in a way that still allows it to stretch a bit, but won't overstretch and get stretched out, that's where, even on woven fabrics, you're still gonna have that stretch on the bias, which if you think of it as like a graph, the selvage is the vertical and the warp is the horizontal, and that direct 45 degree between the two is the true bias, which has the most stretch. You see it in a lot of 1930s dresses. That was a very popular way to cut dresses at the time. So that
I just blacked out. I didn't hear anything. You just
I know.
I was like,
Work. Right. 45 degree angle. Got it. And then and then smash cut to me trying to do any of it. And nope. Cat. Meg, help. You said 45 degree angle. I don't know what this is.
But yeah. I guess for you, where did you start with the armor? Because I think you did it completely on your mannequin.
yeah. So it started as a experiment with just cutting the strips of foam. And please feel free after if you want to come get a closer look at this. The armor is essentially just leather, on the show anyway, leather strips that like lay over each other, front and back. It laces in the back, and then it's got this really high collar. So essentially what I did first was I just went to a craft store, like Michael's, Joann's will do, and I just got those maybe 8x10 or a little bit larger, like just sheets of craft foam that kids use to cut out little things in school. Mm-hmm. And I just started cutting out strips and pinning them directly to the mannequin and just sort of experimenting with how each strip would lay over top of one another. I did that probably 4 different times. So I went through a lot of foam but practice foam before I actually, similar to the fabric, before I cut into the real foam I was going to use. Because it's leather, or it's meant to imitate leather, I used 5mm. If I ever remake this, I'll probably go a little bit thinner, just because this is still actually a little too bulky for the look of what a leather armor would look like. So yeah, I mean, it was just a lot of trial and error before I actually cut into the foam I used, which was just again, like a super flexible, very thin 5mm foam. I have worked with Warbler before, which is another thermoplastic that responds really well to heat. I will say Warbler probably would not have been the best choice for something like this. Warbler is generally a foam or a thermoplastic that is better suited for more structured, bulky, pretty harder edges, and this needed to be something that was pretty form-fitted to me because while it is armor, it's still very Sansa and that it's feminine.
It's not steel armor.
It's not steel armor, yeah. If I were to make steel armor, Warbler would probably be the way I would go. So yeah, once I had kind of the mock-up that I wanted, Kat, our wonderful Brianna Tart cosplayer in the back there, helped me make so on the inside there's just like a fabric bodice that we then just started, I'm not kidding, like just gluing the strips of fabric to. So all in all, a lot of foam went into this, and I want to say it took us about a week working.
Like once you had it down?
Once I had it down and like ready to go, it took a week, anywhere from 3 to 4 hours a night for a solid week, just to get the pieces on. And then the real fun began, which was painting everything. And again, this was my first armor build. I did a lot of research on what kind of paints to use on foam, because foam, especially when heated and shaped, is very porous, and so whatever paint you use, it has to be able to stick. So primed it first with Plasti Dip and then painted all of it. I used black foam, and I honestly could have gotten away with not painting it, but I wanted it to have that like really leathery kind of look. Yeah, so the painting process probably took a night, if I'm honest, like maybe 2 hours, and then the grommet work took another maybe 4 hours. It's a beast, and it was definitely leading up to the first time I wore it, which was at a convention in July. It was not the best choice I've ever made for myself, but I looked cool.
To be fair, cosplayers are not known for our good choices.
We really truly are not. So my best friend cosplays Daenerys, and this is her Belle's the atrocious thing we don't talk about from the show, but it's a badass look, so like, why you gotta. This is also one of those costumes where it's like, it's a choice to wear this in the middle of September in Atlanta, but here we are. And so this was actually, and this is something, and this might be a controversial opinion, I absolutely have nothing against sometimes purchasing cosplays. That's okay. If you're short on time, or if you just don't have the experience level, outsource it. This was an outsourcing, but a funny story about this, when it arrived, it was brown. Like,
do you see this color right here?
That was the whole thing.
Right there.
Other than the red ombre, like the whole upper top of this coat was like cocoa brown. It made no sense. And so another interesting thing about fabric and things that I've been learning is this is pleather. And so I started doing some research on what if I painted this to make it black. And apparently you can paint pleather because it too is very porous. So I just used acrylic paint, no transfer. This is not sealed, it doesn't rub off at all. I think we did 4 layers all told. Yeah, and it's not cracking either. No. So it's a totally transformed coat from what it was, which is just really cool.
That is super cool. For all I've worked with fabric, I honestly hate working with leather. Yeah. Sewing it is a bitch. So I would have never known that.
Yeah.
But I will also say, you want to know the fun thing, the fun technique that you use on that? That's called draping. And I hate draping.
Oh, see, I mean, listen, the subsequent pieces that I've made that have been like more fitted like chest armor pieces, yeah, I just put on music and vibe.
Yeah.
Just drape for days.
Yeah, what I'm talking about with draping is a technique using a mannequin where you basically just stick the fabric on there and start manipulating it so that it has the form that you want. Obviously, when you're working with fabric, at some point you do have to put a seam in if you want it to be form-fitted, because otherwise it's just, you're gonna have weird shapes. And you need to, there's a whole process of like needing to stay on grain and such. I have, other people love draping. I have a personal hatred towards it because one, my mannequin is not a great mannequin for that. And two, it's just always feels like such a waste of fabric. But then I make 4 mock-ups, so I don't know which one is a true waste of fabric. But the technique I use most often is called flat patterning or just flat drafting, and I think most people are more familiar with that in that that's more similar to how you're going to manipulate patterns that you buy commercially or like Joann's, Michael's, any of those places. If you needed to like shorten it or change the sizes, most people are going to do that type of flat or that type of drafting. And I don't know what it is. I just prefer the paper method. So that is honestly what I use for all of my costumes, is starting from a base sloper, and in the industry we consider a base sloper to be like a Vogue 1001 or 1002, which is going to be a basic sheath dress or a basic slacks pattern. Those are for the women. I don't quite remember the men's patterns, but it's pretty much the same. You start with a basic jacket and a basic slacks pattern, and
then everything just kind of builds off that.
Everything builds off of that. Cool.
I'm learning something.
That pattern actually came from, I don't remember the actual pattern number, but it was like a Raglan sleeve pattern, you know, like a baseball tee.
Yeah.
And I just
What?
Everything else came from that. I knew that I wanted to have the Raglan sleeve just because of how it's shaped.
Okay, yeah, sure, that makes sense. I see now. Yeah.
If you've ever seen the costume book from Game of Thrones, all the costumes by Michelle Clapton and her team, I can guarantee you that it was not done with a Raglan sleeve, because I have seen how it's.
Now you gotta give us a demonstration.
So, on the actual dress, what you would see is the princess line continuing around, and you would, so that there's like 5 different pattern pieces right here in the sleeve.
Wow.
That's not what I was going to do.
Sorry,
because
Michelle.
I'm not going to take the fur off. But yeah, that was, I will say I did technically drape the fur in that I just like threw it over.
Well, sure.
And then
just cut along. Yeah.
And then I, this here is probably like the actual wing. And I just like took pet groomer clippers and just shaved it down.
So it's interesting because, I've seen some Sansa cosplayers that have made the feast dress that you're wearing currently, in the absence of being able to find that fabric, because I feel like as soon as that promo picture dropped and that episode dropped, that fabric was gone.
I was able to get it in July, when we were still trying, you know, if anyone is on the Sansa Star costuming page, and we were still trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
Because, but who is it? Carolina at Conference in Nashville. She actually had contacted Michelle Clapton, and they worked together to find this.
Yeah.
I do not. She says it's the screen accurate. I don't think it's quite screen accurate. It doesn't have.
I can't tell. I mean, it looks screen accurate to me.
There's like it has like a more rosette pattern rather than.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Straight across. Yeah. So I don't think it's quite screen accurate, but.
But I've seen some cosplayers that have taken. They can't find that fabric. So I've seen. Speaking of like pet hair clippers, I've seen some Sansa cosplayers just take like a blue fur, like shag fabric, and just like meticulously with like trimmers cut in to until they could like kind of achieve that look. So, I mean, props to them. I don't have patience for that.
Honestly, I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
But that is, I have a friend that works at, or used to work at, if you're ever from Michigan, or ever have been from Michigan, I'm pretty sure you've heard of a place called Dietrich Furs. They were the #1 fur coat seller in Detroit for the longest time, and they're still well known and well regarded in Michigan. She worked there for a time, and when they do make faux fur coats, that shading technique is something that they do because faux fur does not have the grain that actual fur is going to have. Like when you or strip it off and do all the tanning, you still have the whorls from where the animal's limbs were.
Yeah.
So that is a technique that is used by actual furriers and tailors to create something that looks a bit more realistic. Yeah, so that's that's not going to disappear anytime soon. It's just going to remind you of that horrible fact there. So one of the cool things to think about when you're doing that shaving is to think about where on the animal it should have been coming from. So like I imagined it more. I didn't really imagine it coming from where the animal was, but I did imagine like where do I want the shortest fur to be? And that's going to be around the neckline because I do not want it. So that was just like keep going down, 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 and then just gradually let it.
Have you done? So you've done quite a few Song of Ice and Fire book cosplays as well, yes?
A few, yeah.
Which ones?
So actually that green dress that I was wearing yesterday was originally an Elaine Stone cosplay.
Yeah, that's really
from what I was imagining in the books. And then, it was actually in 2019, my friend came with me and I made her what I imagined to be Miranda Royce cosplay.
Nice.
So made her like a beautiful just orange and black dress with the family colors.
Yeah.
And honestly, that was just more of, I wanted to do something quick. So I got a vaguely historical pattern. And it's more like a Renaissance dress where it has this long flowing cape in the back that is created by basically putting slits in the side of the dress. So like the belt goes underneath and then comes forward and he belts that front part, but then leaves the back completely open. It's a great thing. It's very similar to like a robe à la Francais from like the 1700s or 18th century, where they have all that pleating, but all of here is very fitted.
Yeah.
It's a silhouette.
I love that silhouette. Oh, I love that.
The other thing that we wanted to kind of go over, I know we don't have a costume contest here. If you are thinking of doing the costume parade, make sure you have signed up. That is tonight, and I look forward to seeing everyone's costume. But one of the fun things that I enjoy as a cosplayer is going to costume competitions. I love seeing what everyone has done. It's a great way to learn from your fellow competitors. I'm also just a very competitive person, so it's a joy for me. I know some people don't like it, but I love all of it. And I know you've done a couple of costume cosplays, right?
Yeah. I recently, if anyone's familiar with the Disney series Loki, I recently completed a build of Sylvie in that costume and the armor. I competed with that one on Halloween last year.
Okay.
Won. No big deal. It's fine. That's the other way to wrap that up. I'm leading to what I lost. No. And I've judged a couple of contests as well. Actually, in fact, myself and Lakota and Maddie, who are back there, judged the cosplay competition at the first ever Con of Thrones. So that was really cool. I am not generally a competitive person. I enjoy
like, you know, pushing myself, but then when it gets to like, you know, game time, so to speak, I'm just like, you guys are doing great. I'm just right here. Because I think for me, it's like I'm not gonna step up and step out unless I'm like damn sure I'm gonna win. So like I'm just gonna manage my expectations here. But no, yeah. So in the absence of a cosplay competition here, which I think was something that so this is like my third year at IAFC, my first year ever. I remember specifically seeing like costume like parade and performance contest, and I was like, what does that mean? And when I got here and saw it in person, I was like, that's actually really cool. I like that. It takes the pressure off. I feel like you're just like vibing with your friends.
I definitely enjoy it. It's a nice pace because you get to see people's costumes that they may have not entered into a contest, but like if anyone has been here in the past years, there was a lovely old Nan cosplayer. Just absolutely wonderful. I always loved her costumes. And then there's just so many interesting characters that come through. I think we had 8 medals one year. That was amazing. You get like the Amethyst Empress, which if you saw that a couple of years or back in 2019 at our last convention.
That's one of my favorite things about this convention too, just in general, is walking around. There's so many like deep cuts. And it's very much like Dragon Con in a way, where it's like sometimes if you've ever been to Dragon Con, you'll have a lot of like super niche, obscure cosplays, but there's thousands upon thousands of people there. So someone is bound to know exactly what you're doing.
One person.
At least one person is going to see it, but it's worth it for that one person to like see their eyes light up, like, oh my God, you're cosplaying such and such from my like childhood favorite show. IAFC has a very similar vibe where you'll be walking around and you'll pass someone, and then it'll dawn on, wait a minute, did I just pass Alice Karstark in the hallway? And it's Meg. It's Meg. But I mean, it's really cool in that way because something else too about, especially with a fandom like this, we have of course the show, and there's obvious references to the show. But in the books, there's obviously way more characters, and there's George oftentimes goes to great lengths to describe what they're wearing and the importance of what they're wearing to them specifically. And then oftentimes he uses the descriptions of costumes as like really clever storytelling devices and ways to inform you of how that character is feeling. I'm specifically pointing to Cersei, petty-ass Lannister, wearing whole-ass rubies on her breast. As in like one final F you to Robert. Like, my Rhaegar is always on my breast. But you know, little things like that. And so then seeing cosplayers, especially at a convention like this, taking that and putting their own kind of interpretation and spin on it, like how they bring it to life, is always really delightful.
That is why this is my favorite convention, and will always be my home convention. Because the amount of people that you just see, like, I'm pretty sure we have a makeover pool up there.
Oh yeah. We got Magors, we've got
I think there's a Liana, there's a Lady Stoneheart over there. I love it.
I've seen
Great. But kind of going back to the contest, as someone who's judged them, what is something that you look for when you're judging?
Yeah, it's a good question. So oftentimes convention organizers in general will lay down certain parameters depending on category. And you know, so sometimes it'll start with categories like beginner, journeyman, experience, like you'll go up a level. And those sort of put an umbrella over anything. And then other conventions will break those categories out in an even more granular way, right? So you can be eligible for like best overall, and that can be any sort of medium you're using. That can be foam, that can be fabric, that can be a combination of both. Or there can be specific categories that are just for foam smithing and just categories that are just for sewing. So it really just depends on kind of what the organizers set forward. When myself, Lakota, and Maddie judged the cosplay contest for Con of Thrones the very first year, we sort of acted as consultants to the organizers, and because they asked us flat out, like, we don't really know how to break these out in terms of categories, and we said, well, this is what typically is done. And we just gave them like beginner, intermediate, and then champion, I guess. But I think overall, no matter how the categories are sort of broken out, what you're really wanting to look for is the costume really kind of a completed, finished product? Does it have the spit and shine, so to speak? Is it polished? And so with things like a garment, that's looking a lot on the inside of the garment itself and seeing like, is it actually finished on the inside? If you were to look at my Marjorie bodice from last night, that's a hot mess. It's a Mona Lisa, don't get too close to it. And if you breathe on it, it might fall off. So something like that probably wouldn't pass the benchmark, but you know, it just really depends. And then I think if you're looking at something like foam, judges are very interested and they want to touch, right? They want to touch the costumes, and so with foam, that's going to be looking at, you know, what materials did you use, what kind of prep did you use, what kind of prepping process did you use, and then again, is it just a finished, clean product that got the spit and shine treatment? So again, I think just depending on how the categories are broken out is how granular you're going to want to get, because sometimes some contests will have like a best in show, and that's largely based on like, how did the audience respond to it? Did did they hype that person up? And so they'll oftentimes get a reward for that. So yeah,
those are always the fun ones.
Yeah, yeah,
because it's all you watch the people go out on stage, and they are
no,
they are their own hype man as well, but then they're also just getting hyped up from the audience.
Yeah.
This is the number.
Yeah. The most recent competition I was in when I competed in Sylvie, to give you kind of an idea, it was a wide variety of contestants. So there was one guy that had built an entire, from the game Halo, I guess, he built an entire suit of armor out of foam that like lit up. It had a mic in it that he could speak through. I mean, it was really, really excellent. And then another contestant was cosplaying Frodo from Lord of the Rings, but used she explained this, and I'm going to butcher it because, again, I'm not a seamstress, but she used a certain technique that was essentially like she didn't stitch anything together. She basically built patterns that were one continuous pattern all the way around her body, so it only had one stitch in it.
Interesting.
I don't know.
I'm very interested in that.
I'll Google it.
Okay.
I know I didn't explain that right, but it was really remarkable work, and it was clear that she had spent a very, very long time on it. And she actually ended up winning overall. And I mean, rightfully so, because that was incredible. But I remember, I've definitely had moments of competitions where I've looked at someone like the guy in the Halo armor, and I've been like, but why didn't this guy win? Like, this suit lights up. This is amazing. But again, it's just what the judges are looking for in that completed overall. It's the total package, right? Like, technically, it nails it. Aesthetically, it nails it. And the crowd loved it, and it's just a really solid piece.
Yeah. So I do remember when I entered that into Dragon Con's contest, I was, oh goodness, I was up against a lot of other builds that, looking back, like, they were so technically impressive, especially as someone who has no experience working with foam, or at least very little. I was just like sitting here like, well, I did a catch stitch over the entire hem. The entire hem is hand stitched, and that, I mean, and then some of the eyelets are hand stitched. So it's very much like, as I got there, like, oh.
Isn't that fun? It's funny too, because I remember seeing that competition, and you're right, you were up against really stiff competition.
There was a woman who she was a Kyoshi warrior from Avatar: The Last Airbender. She wove her own fabric, dyed it, and then sewed it all together by hand, and I was like, okay. I'm gonna leave.
And then on the flip side of that, though, there was another competitor in that same competition that was cosplaying Infest Nest from the Han Solo Star Wars story. And and like that build was all her. I think the only thing that she did not like build, cast, foam, craft, whatever herself were like the helmet and her gauntlets, which were 3D printed. But everything else, all the soft parts, all of the leather work, all of the modifications that she did to the screen accurate shoes worn, that was all her. And she didn't even place. So I remember that contest specifically was like, this is insane.
It was intense.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah. And honestly, it's gonna vary depending on where you go because
Yeah.
when I placed first in the original Sewing Expo, there was my friend Katie Bauer did a very beautiful Agnes from WandaVision.
Ooh.
She did like the 1950s look, and even her houseplant was like in grayscale. I was
Is
like,
she the one that like did the whole body paint?
I don't know. She didn't do a whole body paint, but or at least not for that competition.
Okay.
But it was amazing. So I think she got first place in the like novice category. I was an expert and she was a novice.
Mhm.
I don't know why she put herself a novice, but anyway, she still got a prize. And it was amazing. She got the fabric, like I think screen printed because it's a plaid, and she wanted to make sure that she could match it up without having to throw anything off grain. So she like screen printed it. I was just, all right.
That's
It's amazing.
Yeah. Again, if you're gonna do that, give yourself time. Don't
Yes.
con crush that.
Do not.
Learn our mistakes.
Yes. Actually, going back to that dress, that is not the underskirt and underclothing. I'm sure you remember that is not the original one that I wore to conference.
Yeah, this has been through some iterations.
Yes, basically I made the first under blouse and dress out of some shiny fabric that was darker because I had looked at something and it must have looked weird on my phone screen, and so I just got that. And
Was it your phone screen though, or was it Game of Thrones?
it was a combination of both.
Color filtering everything.
I mean, yeah, it was definitely Game of Thrones, but it was also
We just blend.
it was both.
Blend.
But so yeah, before I went to DragonCon, I redid the entirety of the under shift and did all of the eyelets again, re-hemmed the dress or the skirt. Even the hem on the underskirt is hand sewn. So I don't know why I did that to myself. That is something I could have easily top stitched, but I chose to do a couch stitch for whatever reason.
Because there's Aries placements in your chart. That's why. That's why.
Yes. For the same reason, well actually no, it's not the same reason that I hand stitched this time, but yeah, that was. As we're getting close to closing, does anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
Craft foam tears pretty easily. How much plastic dip does it take to like hold up to the garment?
That's a really good question. So it tears pretty easily depending on how thick it is, of course, right? But 5mm I actually found didn't really have that much give to it. But Plasti Dip, I'm pretty liberal with it if I'm being honest. Like there really can't be too much. The nice thing too is as you Plasti Dip, if you discover that you're losing a little bit of the shape, especially on smaller prop pieces, if you're looking for something that has a lot of detail, a Dremel is your friend. So you can oftentimes just Dremel out anything that any thickness to the foam itself or to whatever shape you're trying to achieve.
Do you use the spray or the paint plastic?
I use the spray, yeah.
Yes. Do you have anything that or like any techniques that you're still trying to learn? Like, that are on your bucket
Does
list?
sewing count? Just sewing, overarching all of it, just sewing. No, I think I'm always still pushing myself to learn more about foam. I have been sitting on building Jane Thor, that armor, for like years from the comics. I loved it, and then I just saw the trailer and I was like, oh no, it's time. So yeah, that's probably coming up soon, and that will include a helmet build. So stay tuned, because we're gonna learn how to make a helmet out of foam. It's gonna be fun. What about you?
Leatherworking. That is something that I am kind of scared to work with leather because it's very much, there is no forgiveness in leather. You cut it or you You can't use pins.
Yeah.
And I've, to the point that I've like been looking at saddlery school classes to just learn how to work with leather and, you know, do the engraving and the etching and all that. When really I could just call our friend Tom.
I was literally just about to say, one of our very dear friends
Instead of spending like
is a Jon Snow
$500
cosplayer. This man,
to,
I think, knows quite a bit about leather.
instead of spending $500 to go to Utah to make a saddle.
You know, it's a fun trip.
It's a fun trip.
And then you have a saddle.
For
You
a
get some
horse
horseback
I do
riding.
not own.
Yeah, some horseback riding in, build a saddle. Yeah.
I taught
You just write that
leatherworking
off.
Maribetch.
What?
I taught leatherworking Maribetch.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Cool.
Fun. Yeah, I did. Maddie, in the back. Sorry.
What do you think is the most underrated skill or technique in a costumer's tool?
Honestly, hand sewing.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to do buttonholes, hem something. That is, I cut my teeth as like working as a tailor and doing alterations, and even my professors. One of my professors in college, she spent 5 years in Italy, and for 3 of those years, all she did was hem pants, working for a master tailor. And it wasn't until like afterwards that they were like, okay, maybe we'll let you hem a pant or hem a jacket sleeve. So honestly, being able to do that hand sewing, do those small details, I think is something that you cannot overlook, because there are times that you just cannot top stitch. You can't machine sew it. That was especially with this dress. One of the reasons I did not do a machine sewn hem was I was so worried about the fur being moved in a certain direction that I want to hand sew it. So yeah. What about you?
I would say probably getting really familiar and really solid with how heat interacts with thermoplastics.
That's probably true.
That's the biggest one for me, yeah. Because it is possible, I've seen it happen, to absolutely wreck an entire sheet of Warbler because you've heated it up too much. Learn that the hard way.
I'll also add time management. For adding,
We don't know her.
We don't know her.
We don't know her.
That is a good skill. I think you had a question first.
Yeah, I don't know if either of you have any experience with ink stamping on fabric. You talked about Lydia's Empress dress. I tried a little bit of that, and it did not come out well at all. I don't know if that's just a fabric choice, so it doesn't bleed thoroughly, or...
It comes down to a combination of fabric choice and the dye that you're using.
And the dye, yeah.
When you're doing a lot of like very detailed work with dye, you usually have to have some sort of emulsion agent that will keep it from bleeding. And some of it is as I work with toxic materials as part of my job for dyeing fabric. It can be toxic, and I think that's all. But always remember to wear a respirator, especially when you're working on this stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yes, God. Please wear a respirator.
All
When
right.
you're with that journal, yeah.
Yeah, what suggestions would you have when you're cosplaying a character that does not have a lot of clothing description?
Ooh, I've done that a couple of times. Like, I mean, honestly, it was Miranda Royce. She has not a lot. She has one chapter, and just not a lot of description is given to her because the focus is on the lane. Basically what I do for myself is I have made a deep dive and kind of assigned certain silhouettes to each region of Westeros, so that when I am going to make a costume for a book character, the veil, I try to use those long, airy fabrics and silhouettes. From looking between the show and the book, I decided that, okay, I want something that's a little bit airy, has that movement to it in the back. So I looked to the Italian Renaissance and like the Rococo era of France, and kind of found what I wanted out of that. It's very much comes down to you. You can decide anything, find what inspires you, and just kind of work from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know you're probably with Lady Stoneheart has very little clothing description.
They-
When
they
all
talk
because
about
all
her
the
clothes.
focus is on her face.
Yeah.
And she had a dress.
Yeah.
Yes, she has a dress.
And it doesn't fit her.
So there, I think too, you can kind of pull from context clues in any of the stories, right? Like, and even look to what other characters around that character are wearing. Obviously, you're going to have to, take into consideration like if there's a difference in class. But like with Lady Stoneheart, especially the dress being ill-fitting, suggests that the guys probably just found a dress on the road and like threw it on her back and said, "That'll do." And she, of course, is like a vengeance zombie at this point. She doesn't care, right? She's not really worried if her like waist is snatched. But, so like context clues like that. But then, yeah, what Meg said too, really just make it your own, and it just really kind of depends on the aesthetic and the way you want to go. If you want it to be very dark and that grunginess of having just clawed themselves out of a river, or something like this is what contextually we know Elaine wears. So would Miranda be wearing something similar or not?
I think we're getting close on time. One more question?
What do you do to like maintain wigs?
Oh boy. Not what I should be doing. Is the right answer, or the wrong answer. But honestly, I try and keep them in like nice satin-lined bags, so that the hair doesn't get knotted up in as it's being stored. For certain wigs, like my Winterfell wedding wig, I just keep it in that style constantly. I will eventually get to just sewing it. So, because right now I have a bunch of hairpins in it, so I will eventually get to just sewing it down, because that's a wig that will never change. But I also do wigs for the museum that I work at when we do our Halloween events. And those cannot be stored and kept styled all year long because we just do not have the space. So a lot of it is just being very gentle with it. When you wash it, everything has to be hand washed because there's just too much agitation in a washing machine. Using cold water so that it keeps its style. A gentle soap. I like using mane and tail shampoo. It's very nice and it helps keep it shiny. And then I typically just, since I have to store everything as flat as possible at work, straighten everything out and then braid it together. I usually do 2 braids and then just pack it into a Ziploc bag and hang it up for next year when I have to restyle everything.
I'd say the biggest thing is whenever you're done using it, if you obviously with a wig like that, or Daenerys cosplayers know the struggle, but like if you can take the style out, take the style out before you store it. That's just going to preserve the fibers. You're going to prevent some of that breakage that can end up happening as the fibers get a little bit more brittle. I would also say if you are using any sort of hair product or styling product in a wig, wash them at least once before, at least once every couple of months. Same goes with your contacts. This is a call out right now. If you have character contacts, have you changed out those lately? Because you need to. Because I went to open mine the other day and they were just crusty little shriveled things. I said, well, that was my bad. So same with wigs. If you're using hair product, make sure you wash them and keep those fresh.
And I know most hair product is getting away from being oil-based because we just don't like that anymore. But if you do have an oil-based hair product that you use on your own hair, try and avoid using that on your wigs, especially synthetic wigs. If it's a human hair, maybe, but honestly, who can afford human hair? But just trying to use a water-based hairstyling agent is one of the best because it will wash out much easier and it will not destroy your wig. All right, I think we are out of time. So again, I am Megan D. You can find me as Birdie D on most social medias. My pronouns are she, her. And
I'm Britt. You can find me on socials at Salsa Stark, and my pronouns are she, they. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.